Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, rumors swirling about the draft prospects in the top 10. Of course, the teams that are picking in the top 10. That means it's officially draft week, as there's only a couple more days away to the first round of the 2023 NFL draft. We'll hear from GM Dave Ziegler. He met with the media on Friday. Got a few more sound bites to hear from him. Plus, Aaron Rodgers is officially a Jet. What does that mean for New York? And what does that mean for the AFC? Your calls and texts will close out the show, all coming up on Tuesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, April 25th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won, and won, and won, and won, and won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it's available. Of course, if you're checking us out on YouTube, we appreciate you. And of course, if you're checking us out on YouTube, it's because of my man Ari. The only reason we're up on YouTube each and every day is because Ari makes sure that we're there. So check him out on Twitter at Ari Produces. We thank you and we thank him in a major way. Lots to get to on today's show. News and notes here in segment number one. And I mentioned, and it's going to be every single day until the first round of the draft, and probably the second round as well. The draft is said and done, but lots of rumors about the possibility of the Raiders making a move for C.J. Stroud. All of a sudden, he is the guy that a lot of teams or somebody is targeting to try to make him drop down the draft board. And that's kind of how it goes when it comes to the draft, right? Early on, it was all Bryce Young, all C.J. Stroud. Will Levis was kind of in that conversation. Then all of a sudden it went dark on Will Levis. Now Will Levis's name is being surrounded with the number 2 overall pick. Maybe the Houston Texans go that direction. Maybe the Colts at number 4 go that direction. All of a sudden people are talking about Will Levis again. And now C.J. Stroud is like enemy of the state. So, again, that's just how draft week goes. It's going to go like a roller coaster effect, as always. That could be because teams want, C.J. Stroud to drop. That could be because agents want Will Levis to go up. I mean, I don't really know the reason why, but we know it happens each and every year. Some guys will, their name will get pumped up the last week before the draft. And usually it's this week when there's somebody, I think Baker Mayfield, right? He really started coming on when Cleveland decided that they were going to make him the number 1 overall pick. He really started coming on at the last minute, and all of a sudden the day of the draft, like there was rumors and reports from Shefty and others that, yeah, Baker Mayfield indeed is going to be the number 1 overall pick. So the closer we get to Thursday, the first round of the draft, the more we'll probably have a better idea of what's going on. So C.J. Stroud is starting to go down the board apparently, and a lot of people are talking about the Raiders wouldn't even have to trade up to number 3 to get him, but he actually could possibly drop to number 7. Now, I don't see that happening, but again, you never do know. Also, there's reports that the Raiders are leaning cornerback Devin Witherspoon or offensive lineman Peter Skoronski. So there's that, right? I don't think that the Raiders need to go offensive line with their first pick in the draft, but then again, they might go ahead and go that direction to solidify the trenches, right? They may say that that right side needs to be solidified. We do know that Dave Ziegler loves versatility. Peter Skoronski does provide that. A lot of people believe he's going to be a guard as opposed to a tackle, but if they get part of that right side solidified, then, that's half the battle, and of course, that's what the Raiders are going to want to do at some point. So there's reports about Peter Skoronski could be the pick. They could go defense, Devin Witherspoon. Who knows if they go Christian Gonzalez, what they feel about him. But those are also some reports that are out there. Speaking of Peter Skoronski, Dave Ziegler, when he met with us on Friday at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center, he was asked about the versatility of Skoronski and how that's similar to what Dylan Parham, the young man out of Memphis that the Raiders drafted in the 3rd round with their first pick last season. So he kind of compared and contrasted Dylan Parham and Peter Skoronski and what he likes about Skoronski and his versatility.
Well, when you talk about Skoronski and then you talk about Dylan, you're talking about 2 players that have multi-position versatility. And, we've talked about the value of that versatility. You only get so many players that you can take to the game. And so having players that can do different things and fill different spots, that increases a player's value. While he's played left tackle at Northwestern, you see a player that can play tackle. You see a player that has a play style that could go in and play guard too. And so when so that's attractive about him. Offensive lineman, intelligence is important. Versatility is important. I also think, like, just in general, the ability to pass protect. And run blocking is important too. But I think you have to have a certain skill set to be able to be a solid pass protector in the NFL from an athletic standpoint. And so I think that's an important trait when you're differentiating between guys is, some of the ability to pass protect.
So there's Dave Ziegler talking about Peter Skoronski. So, clearly, versatility is one of the big things for Dave Ziegler. That's something that they've been talking about and really preaching since day one. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Skoronski be a guy that the Raiders are looking at and want to pick. For my money, I don't think that they want to get him at number 7. I think that there's a bigger impact player that they can get at number 7, but that's just me. I'm not inside the minds of Dave Ziegler. I'm not inside the minds of Champ Kelly, Josh McDaniels, any of those guys. So I don't know what they covet the most, but I just feel like that there could be a bigger impact player drafted at number 7 as opposed to an offensive lineman. But again, that's just me. So how about outside corners? I mentioned Devin Witherspoon out of Illinois, and he's cornerback number 1 for me. I do like Christian Gonzalez. I do like Joey Porter. Emmanuel Forbes is my guy that I'd like at the back end of round 1. But, I do like Devin Witherspoon. I think he'd fit in really well with what Patrick Graham wants to do. So here's Dave Ziegler talking about the traits that he's looking for from outside corners, as it's a very deep draft when it comes to the corners.
I think one of the big things is guys that can affect the passing game by making plays on the football. I think that's a trait that you want to see. And it doesn't always materialize in college stats, though, because a lot of guys are asked to play a certain type of way. And that's part of the difficulty in maybe evaluating the position. You may watch a guy that maybe doesn't have much ball production because they've asked him to play a bunch of cover 3 and he's playing 7-8 yards on the ball. But then when you look at his athletic traits, his short area quickness, his explosive burst, his speed, that's the level of projection that you have to make. But I think people that can make an impact on the ball is important. I think for us, we have a little bit more diversification in our coverages in terms of both playing zone and playing in some man schemes. So guys that can play man coverage, guys that you can see have a feel at the top of routes to match routes and stay in phase and those types of things. And also I'd say press technique, which is something I think you can improve on. But just a player's ability to play with patience at the line of scrimmage, ability to affect the route and disrupt the route from a man-to-man situation are a couple of the traits that we look for. And there's also the aspect I think that gets lost is tackling. You still have to be able to tackle. You get edge runs. You get, especially, the games become a little bit more horizontal, not as many vertical runs, straight down the middle of the formation. And so guys that can show up and tackle, I think that's still an attractive trait for us too.
So pretty detailed answer right there from GM Dave Ziegler about what he's looking for in corners. And of course, with Patrick Graham and the scheme that they run, they do have many different schemes and many different styles. So they run some man press covers. They do zone press covers. So again, I think Witherspoon, plus his physicality, I think that he would really bring a lot to that Raiders defense. And he's really a guy that I've been talking about quite a bit. And I remember talking to him at the Combine and how much I just liked his confidence and liked who he was, and knowing that he comes from Illinois and it was, not heavily recruited. He's one of those guys like Nate Hobbs who has a chip on his shoulder, but he's a better player than Nate Hobbs. So I could definitely see Ziegler and Champ Kelly and Josh McDaniels making the move for Devin Witherspoon. I'd be okay with that. So then I followed up the corner question and asked about production versus potential and projections, because again, you hear Dave Ziegler talk about guys that can get their hands on the ball, guys that could affect plays, not only just make a breakup, not only just have a pass defense, but also come away with the interception. So I asked him, and you'll hear the question about production versus potential and also projections.
Is there a fine line between guys who've had production in college and guys who you think have they project to be that guy? They have the potential to have that production on the next level.
Yeah, you have to be careful, and I think that's because you can project something that's not there when you project too much. And so I think you have to take all things into account too. And that's why whether it's going from the game film to maybe a Senior Bowl practices or another All-Star Games practices, or, taking the Combine and looking at some of the things that they were done there, maybe their ability to make plays on the ball because you didn't get to see them catch the football a lot. So you just take all those puzzle pieces that are made available to you to help in that projection. But I think it's something you still have to be careful with.
I think that's real important because I say it all the time, right? About guys that are in high school that make plays usually make plays in college. Guys that are in college that make plays usually find a way to make plays in the NFL. And I know obviously it's a different ball game. It's a different speed of the game. I get that. But guys that are just natural, have that playmaking ability, like Emmanuel Forbes. That's why I like Emmanuel Forbes from Mississippi State. Is he going to get burned some? Absolutely. but he's a guy that just expects to make plays. And that's the kind of mentality you got to have when you're in the NFL. And the only way you're going to have that is if you've already had it. Right? All of a sudden, they can't teach you to be a ball hawk. If you weren't that guy in college, you most likely won't be that guy in the NFL. So that's why I asked the question about production versus potential and projections. And you saw what he said, that you got to be really careful because you could project something that's not there. The worst case scenario would be to project something that wasn't there. I think that's what the Raiders did with Damon Arnette. When they drafted him in the first round, they projected him to be, some stud because, well, he played across from Jeffrey Okudah and he got a lot of attention and he actually, stood up pretty well at times. So they projected him to all of a sudden take that and carry it over to the NFL where that wasn't the case. Even though he had a bunch of red flags, they're like, yeah, it'll work out. Not a big deal. So I think it's very careful. You got to really look for guys that have already had production in college because they'll look to have that same production in the NFL. Now, one guy who we talked about and debated a lot on the Locked On Raiders podcast and on the radio and just nationally is defensive tackle Jalen Carter out of Georgia. So Dave Ziegler was asked if that situation with Jalen Carter is a little bit more complicated for the Raiders as opposed to the other teams because of what happened with Henry Ruggs here in Las Vegas.
No, I don't think so. For me, it's not, Adam, in terms of more complicated. I think, looking at Jalen, we looked at Jalen like every other player that's in the draft and doing our due diligence on all aspect of the player, from football learning, from practice habits, from the personal side of things, on the field, off the field, how people interact, how they interact with people, how they treat people, their experience at the pro day, combine, all of those different aspects. I don't think we want to cheat the process with any prospect in that regard. We want to hit those bases for each individual prospect. And then, of course, on some prospects, it's deeper, right? There's just more things to look at and more things to consider based on, their situation. And so Jalen, in that regard, was, similar and to a lot of players in the draft and, feel very comfortable with the work that we've done on him.
So Dave Ziegler said no. No, it's not more complicated. And, the thing about it is the one, not get me out of jail, card, but the one thing that he can hang his hat on is like, hey, I wasn't involved in the Henry Ruggs situation. All that was before this staff, before Ziegler, before Kelly, before McDaniels. I mean, that was all the former staff. So that's how they could say, nope, that's not on our watch. And I don't think Henry Ruggs is a bad dude. I just think Henry Ruggs made a bad decision. So if Jalen Carter's there at number 7, it feels like if they did the background check and they feel like everything checks out, that he could be a player for them, right? I mean, I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if they've, wiped him off their board. I know that was a report early from Vic Tafur, but it seems like that was shot down, that was not the case. And just listening to what Dave Ziegler had to say about that situation not being more complicated, seems like that, if he's there at 7, and like I said, if all the background checked out, then they would have no problem going ahead and picking him because, again, they weren't the ones that picked Henry Ruggs. They weren't the ones that picked Damon Arnette. They weren't involved in any of that stuff. That was all the previous staff. Just got a couple more sound bites for you from Dave Ziegler, his media session that he had with us at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center on Friday. And one is a very important one about having 12 picks and how much pressure is there to get it right. So here's Dave Ziegler talking about, is there pressure to get it right since he does have the 12 picks?
Yes. I want to get 12 contributing players, and so, we put that pressure on ourselves, and I put that pressure on myself, and Josh puts the pressure on himself, and just as a scouting department, we feel that pressure in a good way, because I think that pressure drives you. It drives you when you're meeting for 15 straight days. There's a monotony that can, that you could let grow in. But I think that pressure, that motivation to get it right, that motivation to improve the team, though, that's the pressure that keeps us, keeps us pushing and keeps us focused and dialed in.
And that's the thing about it. There's definitely pressure, right? I knew it when I didn't ask the question, Ed Graney did, but when he asked the question, I knew that the answer was yes because, this is a huge draft. 12 draft picks, and I don't believe, I've said it from day one, I don't believe that they'll make 12 selections. I really don't. You don't need 12 picks, but it gives you the opportunity to navigate around the draft and really be selective and say, all right, you know what? We want to target this guy. Let's do what it takes to go get him, right? If they start to see somebody that falls, they can make a move for him, but they've got to get it right. And the reason, and it's probably unfair pressure on them, but there's been so many misses with the Raiders' previous staffs that they're in the position where they've got to rebuild the talent cupboard, and it's really on their watch. So they've got to get it done. And so the year that you have 12 picks, it's really like, all right, here you go. It's your opportunity. Just like when John Gruden and company had the 3 first-round draft picks. All right, this is the draft. You got to get it right? This is a huge draft, and it was. It was one of the most important drafts in the history of the Raiders, and it just didn't go the way it was supposed to go. It just didn't. I know they hit on later-round picks, which is great, but to miss out on all your first-round picks for the most part is just not okay. Think about it. 5 first-round picks in 2 years, and who's left on the team? No Henry Ruggs, no Damon Arnett, no Cleve Farrell, no Jonathan Abram, and Josh Jacobs is on the franchise tag. Like, that is a fail, right? That is an absolute fail. So now Dave Ziegler only has the 1 first-round pick. He's got to get that right, but on top of that, he's got 12 total, so he can really work his way around the draft and really get some good players to add to the team. It's funny, I was sitting in my office at the radio station on Monday, and our promotions guy, Craig, walked in and said, because he knew I was going to Kansas City, he was like, man, just tell me the Raiders are going to get some good players. And I was like, well, they got 12 cracks at it. He's like, how can they miss? And I said, don't ask me that question, dude. Don't ask me that question, because it's been there, done that, right? So I said, look, man, I believe in Dave Ziegler. I believe in Champ Kelly. I believe they'll get it right. And maybe this is blind faith that I'm rolling on. But something about when Dave Ziegler talks and you hear him, break down these players, there's something calm, cool, and collective about him that makes me feel like he's going to get it right. I really feel like the right people were in place to get this franchise turned around. Again, that could be wishful thinking. And if I'm wrong, then I'll come back and be like, you know what? My bad. Guess I didn't get that right. But it's just something about, like I said, talking to the guy, seems like he's got everything right where he wants it, and he's ready to go ahead and start turning this franchise around as far as a lot of talent on the team. So as far as I'm concerned, things are going to go right, but of course they've got to execute it. And I mentioned those 12 picks and what they could do with those 12 picks. I don't think that they're going to select guys at every single location. I think that they're going to package a couple, move up. They'll probably trade back a little bit. If you remember a year ago, he traded back quite a bit, right, when it came to to the draft. So I think he's going to do that again. They'll probably come away out of the draft with about 8 players, but there's a possibility that they can do a lot of good things, including trading back into the back end of round 1, something I said a couple weeks ago I thought was going to happen. And this is just a gut feeling. I just think with all those draft pet picks that they have to them, that they have an opportunity to go ahead and trade back into the back end of round 1 if they see someone dropping that they really like an Emmanuel Forbes. And I don't know if that's a player that they like, but that's a player that I like. So I'm just throwing that out there. So Dave Ziegler was asked about the possibility of trading back into the back end of round 1, and if that's so complicated, depending on how far he's trying to move up from, where they are at number in the second round, which is 38, where are they trying to trade up to? Are they trying to trade up to 25, or are they trying to trade up to 31, right? There's a big difference in that, and if that's going to play a big factor in if they're able to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's what you have to weigh, and you have to understand in that situation just the landscape of the first round, and there's a lot that goes into that, understanding the gap between, the second-rated corner on your board, or the second-rate defensive tackle versus the 4th defensive tackle, or the second tight end on the board versus the 3rd tight end on the board. What's that gap in terms of skill? What's that gap in terms of where you think you could potentially draft that player? If you're trading up in the draft, how many players could that potentially take you out of? And so there's a lot of that mechanics, and there's some guessing to that, obviously, because we don't know. But there's a lot of those conversations that you have to work through before Thursday and have an understanding of at least what you would be willing to do.
So there you go, Dave Ziegler on the possibility of trading back into the back end of round 1. Again, something I just feel like that they're going to do. I don't know why I feel like on Thursday they're going to come away with 2 picks in the first round, but I really do. We'll see if it shakes out that way, but again, that's just kind of what my gut feeling tells me. Coming up in segment number 2, Aaron Rodgers is now officially a JETS Jet. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the compensation that the Jets had to give up to Green Bay to get him, and also what does that mean for the AFC. We'll do that after I tell you about FanDuel. And if you're watching baseball like I watch baseball, there's a lot of home runs being hit. There's no hitters being thrown. Double plays are back. Stolen bases are going down. No better place to get in on the Major League Baseball action than FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. And right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. And there's all kind of different things you could bet on. And it's funny, I said no hitters. I don't believe there's been a no-hitter thrown yet in baseball. I don't think there has. And this might be, we're almost, a month into baseball already, and I don't think there's been a no-hitter hit. So maybe that's something you could place a bet on. Either way, you have a great chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to talk about Aaron Rodgers and the fact that he is finally a Jet. Like, we knew it was going to happen. He went on McAfee a long time ago, said he wants to be a member of the Jets, and then all of a sudden it just came to a halt, right? It came to a stop. They couldn't agree on compensation, something I thought that they did backwards with the Packers. They should have agreed on compensation before they ever went and visited with Aaron Rodgers and agreed with him that he'd come play for him. They should have got the whole compensation thing worked out. Then they wouldn't have had to drag their feet like they did. But finally on Monday, it got done. So here it is. The Jets, they get Aaron Rodgers, pick number 15 in this upcoming draft, a 2023 fifth-round pick, which is number 170 overall. The Packers, they get pick number 13. So basically the Jets and the Packers swap their first-round picks. Also, the Packers get a 2023 second-round pick, which is number 42, a sixth-round pick, number 207, a conditional 2024 second-round pick that will become a first-round pick if Rodgers plays 65% of the plays. So there it is. That's what happens. I'm not sure as far as the compensation when it comes to money, how much the Packers are going to be on the hook for and how much the Jets are actually going to pay of that $60 million salary that Aaron Rodgers has. But for me, in my money, that's a lot of capital that they had to give up for Aaron Rodgers. And I know I went on the show and talked about getting Aaron Rodgers, and if it was a reasonable price, would you be interested in it? And I said I'd be very interested in getting Aaron Rodgers if it was a reasonable price. And I'm sorry, Raider Nation, I don't think that is a reasonable price. Think about it. 2024 second-round pick becomes a first if Rodgers plays 65% of the plays. So if he does more than 65%, then all of a sudden that second-round pick turns into a first-round pick. What if he decides he wants to retire after that, but he played 85 or 90% of the season, right? Then all of a sudden the Jets are screwed. They're looking for another quarterback, and they don't have a first-round pick. It seemed like a lot to me. And Andrew Brandt, who is a former Packers executive, he's an all-time great, right? I mean, he does a lot of good stuff now, on Monday Morning Quarterback and all that good stuff. But a long-time Packers executive, matter of fact, signed Aaron Rodgers to his rookie deal. He put out on Twitter, let's get this straight. The Packers get a first-round pick swap in 2023, a high second-round pick in 2023, a likely first-round pick in 2024, at worst a second, a $60 million financial obligation taken off their hands for a player that was never going to play for them again, right? I mean, that's the reality of it, right? Aaron Rodgers definitely wasn't going to play. Andrew Brandt went on to say, what I still don't understand from a Jets perspective, the 2024 second converts to a first with 65% playing time. No statistical conditions, no playoff conditions, really. So what that means is the Jets believe they're a Super Bowl team. They believe they're going to be playing at the end of the season in Allegiant Stadium representing the AFC in the Super Bowl. That's what they're banking on. This is going to be a one-year thing to them, and they're going to go basically year to year with Aaron Rodgers, but they're putting all their chips in the basket of getting it done just this year. Are the Jets a much better team with Aaron Rodgers? Sure. Are they a Super Bowl team? I'm not too sure about that. I think they still have some areas of need. They still got to go ahead and improve a few different areas of that team. The defense, really sticking good. So I like the defense. But how quickly can Aaron Rodgers get up to speed with the wide receivers that are there? Of course, he's got some people that are familiar, like Alan Lazard there. So that's a lot. And then the Jordan Love era for Green Bay is going to get started. And it's funny, you know how long Jordan Love's been in the league. The Packers have to decide on Jordan Love's fifth-year option by next week, by May 1st. And it's worth $20.272 million fully guaranteed for 2024, which is not a lot to pay for a quarterback, but just to realize that Jordan Love has done basically a whole lot of nothing in the NFL so far, and he's already got to have a fifth-year option decision made by next week, which is May 1st. And, of course, they'll pick it up, but, he's going to get that $20 million bag no matter what. So what does this mean for the AFC quarterbacks, and what does this mean for the silver and black? Just think about this, and I've talked about it quite a bit on the show, but Albert Breer, fantastic writer for Monday Morning Quarterback on SI, he put this out on Twitter as well. He said, so let's look at the list for the AFC. Quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Trevor Lawrence, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson. If Lamar stays in Baltimore, at least two of the quarterbacks on the list that I just ran off will miss the playoffs in 2023. Think about that, right? I mean, there is, 9 quarterbacks on that list. So at least two of those really good quarterbacks are going to miss. And so what it does for the Raiders, in my perspective, means at some point you've got to get a dude that can compete with those guys. And I'm not saying they got to do it this year. I know I've been talking about Anthony Richardson if he falls to the Raiders at 7, C.J. Stroud if he falls to the Raiders at 7, or if they decide that was their guy and they want to trade up and go get him, maybe that's a possibility. I'm not saying that they have to address the quarterback this year, right? I'm not saying that they're one quarterback away, one Anthony Richardson, one C.J. Stroud, hell, one Bryce Young away from being a Super Bowl team. But at some point you realize they do have to find a guy that can compete with those dudes. Again, Allen, young cat, going to be around for a while. Burrow hasn't even hit his second contract yet. Herbert, same thing. Lamar, who knows what's going to happen with his situation. Probably something gets done sooner rather than later. Trevor Lawrence, we know he's just scratching the surface. Patrick Mahomes is going to be around for a while. Rodgers, of course, won't be around long. A year, 2 years max. Deshaun Watson, feel like he's going to be be there in a while for Cleveland. And then Russell Wilson. I guess you could sit there and say, yeah, I don't know how long he's got left in the tank, especially if he doesn't do what he's supposed to this year. I can see Sean Payton moving on from him. But still, the point is, there's some really stinking good quarterbacks in the AFC. And at some point, the Raiders have got to do better than Jimmy G. And that's not a slight to Jimmy G. That's just reality. I think we all know who Jimmy G is. He's not going to be a guy that's going to gunsling it with those guys. And I'm not saying gunslinging is the best way to go at all times, but at some point, you've got to have a dude that could put the team on his arm and say, I got this. Don't worry. I'm going to get it done. All those quarterbacks I ran off can do that. The Raiders got to find their guy. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be this year, but at some point, they've got to get it done. And I don't know what the wins are going to be looking like this year for the Silver and Black. They had 6 in 2022. I'm assuming that they're going to do a little bit better than that. If all things go better, if their defense is better and Jimmy G can stay healthy, I'm assuming they're going to do better than 6. So I just look at it and say, okay, so when's the next time they can get that quarterback that can be that dude that can compete with those guys, right? And I've kind of floated the idea maybe they build up the defense and build up the rest of the team this year and really go all in on building the team and then look at it and say, okay, now we got to go get our Superman. We got to get our guy that can compete with Mahomes, with Herbert, with Burrow, with Allen, with Watson, with Lawrence, all the Lamar, all those guys. Maybe they go do that the following year. And that's fine if that's the plan. But I don't know when they address that position and that Superman, and that's why I took a shot on the Fitz and Harry draft, and I know a lot of people didn't like it. That's why I took a shot on Anthony Richardson, because if he is that guy and all he has to do is sit behind Jimmy G for a year or two and all of a sudden could turn into that dude, just like Patrick Mahomes was allowed to sit behind Alex Smith for a year before he was given the reins. If that could be Anthony Richardson, and I know he's got some work to do. I know that he only has 13 games of college starts, so, obviously that's not the same as Mahomes. Mahomes had plenty of action that he played at Texas Tech, so, I'm not trying to say that the two are the same, but if he can get on the same page, if he can work his tail off like I do believe he will and get to where he needs to go, he could end up being that dude. And if he could be anything like Cam Newton, and again, that's tough to, put anything like that. Cam Newton was a national champion coming out of college. Cam Newton was a number 1 overall pick. Cam Newton ended up being a league MVP. But if he can end up turning that athleticism and figuring out as a quarterback as well, he could be dangerous. That's why I, throw him into the mix. C.J. Stroud, I like his accuracy. I think he could be really good. I know a lot of people are down because of the S2 scores. They're thinking that he's a dummy and he's not going to be able to figure things out. I don't believe that. But he has the Ohio State quarterback stigma that's on him, so there's that. Hendon Hooker, he's got accuracy. He threw a lot of touchdowns as opposed to very little interceptions in college, but he's also coming out of that Tennessee offense, right? I mean, all these guys have warts. Will Levis had a bad year, was banged up last year. Could he be better? Could he be the guy he was in 2021? Sure. But you also have to make sure you develop him. Could some of these later round picks be that guy? Maybe. Right? I have my doubts. I know I like DTR a lot, Dorian Thompson-Robinson out of UCLA. Can he be that guy? Maybe, right? But he'd have to take some development. Jake Haener out of Fresno State? Maybe, right? I mean, Clayton Tune out of Houston? Maybe. I mean, it's all the same, right? I mean, again, this is not the sexiest quarterback class at all. It's really not the sexiest class as far as just top-end talent. I mean, Todd McShay, going back to his pre-draft conference call he had the other day, said he had 17 first-round grades. Out of 31 guys selected, 31 teams selecting, he only had 17 first-round grades. So that lets you know that's barely even half the first round are really first-round guys. So the other half is going to get picked in the first round and not be first-round talent. So there's that. But at some point, the point of this segment here is the Raiders got to go find their guy that could compete with the likes of Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Trevor Lawrence, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson. That's a murderer's row right there of quarterbacks represented in the AFC. That's all I got for you for segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Look at Aaron Rodgers and the deal he did to go to the New York Jets, or the deal that the Jets made with the Packers so he can be a member of the Jets, and also looking at how that affects the quarterbacks in the AFC. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Before I get to that, though, I do want to tell you about BetterHelp. This episode of the Locked On Raiders podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. Give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/lockedon and get on your way to being your best self. What do I mean by that? Well, in life, it never comes with an instruction manual, right? When you think everything is cruising along and you got everything figured out, you're good to go, that's when a curveball hits you. Or all of a sudden something out of left field comes along and you didn't see it coming. And then you're looking for the instruction manual and you realize, oh, wait, hold on. Life doesn't have an instruction manual. And so you just never know what it's going to take to help get you back on the straight and narrow and get you back to where you need to be. And sometimes it's as simple is talking to somebody. And that's where BetterHelp comes in. If you've ever thought about any kind of therapy, give BetterHelp an opportunity. Check out BetterHelp.com. All you got to do is fill out their brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. And everything is entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and it's suited to your schedule. So if you want to discover your potential with BetterHelp, check them out today. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon. Get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/lockedon. Again, BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com/lockedon. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with ABA Ivan Davis. He's calling to talk about a couple things. One, the A's, and also a project quarterback. Here he is, ABA Ivan Davis.
What's up, Q? This is ABA Ivan Davis. I just called about two things. Thank you for exposing the A's for the criminal element that they are and how they got rid of the Raiders. A lot of fans don't know that it was the A's that forced Mark Davis out. Mark Davis takes a really bad rap in Oakland because they just don't know the inside information about that the A's had everything to do with that and wouldn't let it help stall negotiation. And now all of a sudden they're gone. Okay, and the fans out here are hurting like real bad. Because most of them are Raider fans, okay, and they feel like they've been jilted twice, and they have, but both times by the A's. And the other one, back to Raider news, is ESPN had a special on a quarterback, that could be another Purdy from San Francisco. The guy set passing records in college, but he played at a Division II school that wasn't competitive, and I'm just curious what you think the Raiders could take him as a project in the 7th round since we got a couple of extra picks. Okay, that he's supposed to drop all the way down there, but he threw for over 17,000 yards. Okay, tell me what you think. All right, go Raiders.
Thanks so much for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And yeah, the A's are a sore subject, man. They make me mad, right? I mean, their business operation is just not what it's supposed to be. They haven't been putting out a very good product on the field. I mean, literally, they've been putting out their AAA team on the field for the longest, and the AAA team is the Aviators. They already play here in Las Vegas, and I'm good with that. I'm good with just having them. They have a beautiful ballpark. Let's stick to that. That's fine. I don't mind going to the ballpark, checking out the minor leaguers because I know it's minor leaguers. Oakland, the way that they did the city of Oakland and really pinned them against themselves again. I mean, they just keep doing that, and I don't want to get into all the politics about, what the city did, what the A's did and all that. It's just, it wasn't right. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, the ones that suffer the most are the fans there in the Bay Area that are big A's fans. And I know how loyal the A's fan base is. I mean, look, we're talking about the Raiders every day. I know how loyal the Raider fan base is. But, man, there's something special about going to an A's game at the Coliseum that it's just a shame that they've put the kind of product out on the field and the players out there on the field. And it's no fault of the players, right? I mean, it's the management that's been choosing to act like that they're a poorly ran team when they're really not. They make money hand over fist. They just choose to be cheap about it and not spend any money and get rid of all their good players and not take care of their building and have, just ridiculousness going on in the press box and all that. It's just bad, man. So I just feel for the fan base because, again, it's just like another pro team is getting, ripped right from underneath them. And it sucks, right? The Warriors are in San Francisco. The Raiders obviously here in Vegas. Now the A's trying to, chase down their coattails and come down to Vegas too. It just sucks, but I get it. That's just kind of how it goes. And like I said, don't really want to get into the politics. Everything played a role in it, but the A's just seemed like that they were always looking for something else the whole time. But there's that. As far as the quarterback, you're talking about the quarterback from Shepherd. His dad was actually a champion arm wrestler, Tyson Bagent, I believe is how you say his name. I did see that special on ESPN that you were talking about, and his dad is very adamant that he's the best quarterback in the draft. We'll see when he gets selected. He would definitely be a project. he probably will be an undrafted free agent, or he might turn into a Brock Purdy, like a Mr. Irrelevant, right? Get drafted probably late in the 7th round or something like that. But he very well could end up being, a guy that's an undrafted free agent. And so I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders saw him and brought him to camp just to see what he's got. I'm not guaranteeing he's going to be anybody, but I know that they like guys that have gone through some things, right? Some trials and tribulations, make them kind of harder workers. So maybe there's somebody that they would take a look at. I'm not too sure, but it's funny that you brought up that special because I did see it just the other night on ESPN. Up next, got a text from HK in the 559. Said, "What up, Q? My text is about the guy that got upset at your mock draft pick. In my opinion, talent doesn't equal being a dog. You know how many talented people are sitting on the couch? To me, a dog is someone who made something of themselves even though they were told their whole life they weren't going to be anything. Max Crosby was overlooked by most teams, but he proved everyone wrong, not because of talent, but because he works hard. If you look at his tape, he didn't have good technique. He just worked. That guy said we need dogs, take the best talent available. Talent doesn't always equal hard work." That's HK in the 559, and you ain't got to tell me that, brother. You know I sign up for that every day of the week and twice on Sunday. I believe in hard work over everything, and that's why I'm willing to roll the dice on Anthony Richardson if he were to fall to the Raiders at 7, right? And I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're trying to sell him to the..." No, I'm not. I'm just saying I believe in people with that strong work ethic, and maybe I believe in them to a fault, and that's fine. I'll buy that. But I'll tell you right now, I'd rather have a bunch of dudes, like you mentioned, Max Crosby, that are just going to work their tail off to be great, as opposed to guys who just walk in and think that they're great, right? I'll take that dude who's maybe not as talented, but will be the harder worker. I'll take that dude every day of the week and twice on Sunday. Like I said, that could be me to a fault, but that's what I'm a roll. That's how I'm rolling. I'm good with that. So thank you so much for that text. I appreciate you. And like I said, you ain't gotta tell me, man. When it comes to working hard, I sign up for that all the time. I'm on Team HK when it comes to that. Up next, got a call from Proto. He's calling from the 778. He's calling to talk about a few draft prospects that he's got his eye on this week as we get closer and closer to the first round of the draft. Here he is, Proto from the 778.
Yo, Q, it's draft week, baby! Draft week! Honestly, these are some of the best weeks of my life, so I cannot wait for everything that happens. By the way, this is Proto from the 778. And I got a couple guys that I want to talk about that I've kind of changed my mind on. Christian Gonzalez. Initially, I thought if he's there, just straight down, because I don't particularly like him. But there is one thing with him that I do like is that he's very young. I believe he's only 21 years old. That actually does make me a little bit better on him just because it will give you a lot of longevity. And there's probably still a lot of growth to come from him. Secondly, Tyree Wilson. I'm going to be honest, Q. I'm pushing him down on my board, man. I'm not, everything I'm hearing, there's nothing that's consensus on Tyree Wilson. So I don't think I'm a fan. I think if he's there, I would love to see a trade down. I would be okay if you picked him up around like 15 to 20. But before that, I'm not a fan. I think he's got a lot of upside. But unlike Christian Gonzalez, he's actually not that young. So again, that's something to consider. I believe he's already like 24 years old by the time he's going to start an NFL career. So something to look at there. Besides that, I'm still really pulling for Devin Witherspoon, but I just don't think Devin Witherspoon is going to be there. I think the Lions are going to snatch him up, man. So I still think the best scenario would be a trade down. I would love a trade down to get to around 11, 12, and pick up Joey Porter Jr. because it seems like the Raiders are really high on him. So if they can like trade down a bit to get him around 11 and 12, that would feel so much better. I'm not gonna lie. So right now, though, I mean, I'm excited about this draft. I really hope they knock it out of the park. But that's kind of where I'm going with my thought process. Anyways, let me know what you think. And as always, Raiders.
There you go, my man. I like the thoughts. Christian Gonzalez, Tyree Wilson, Devin Witherspoon, a potential trade down to 11 or 12, grab Joey Porter Jr. I like those guys, right? I know you said you're not as high on Tyree Wilson. I think all those guys would be really good defensive players for the Silver and Black. I think there's a place for all those guys on the Raiders. Gonzalez and Porter, I mean, those are and Witherspoon, no-brainers. The Raiders need corner help, and they need some dudes at the corner. Like, they can have guys, but they need dudes. Tyree Wilson, I think he's going to turn into a dude. I don't think he's going to be a dude immediately. I think he could be a guy that could be a piece of a rotation, but I think similar to Max Crosby, he's got greatness in front of him. Right. So, I mean, you look at the production he's had in college. I think that there's some good stuff to grow on there. So going back to what Dave Ziegler said, you heard it from him in segment number 1. He does want to see the production. Well, Wilson has production, and I think he's only getting better. That guy, I just there's something about Tyree Wilson I really believe in. I think all those guys would be great additions to the Raiders defense. So I don't have any problems with any of those. And then, like you said, if they trade back to 11 or 12 and they're still able to get a guy like Joey Porter Jr., that's cool. That's what I did in the Locked On mock draft, right? I traded back to 10 and still got Devin Witherspoon. And I could have traded back to 11 and still got him, but I just made a mistake and kind of played my cards out loud instead of, being secretive. And I would have ended up trading with the Titans, and I would have got one more pick, which it wasn't a whole lot, but still, I could have made one more move and still got the guy that I was looking for. So Proto, thanks for the call. We'll see how it all shakes out, man. I'll probably talk to all those guys this week as I'll be in Kansas City. I'm excited about that. Gonzalez will be in the green room. Tyree will be in the green room. Witherspoon, all those guys. Joey Porter Jr. So if everything goes the way I believe it's going to go, you should hear from those guys before the draft on Thursday. Up next, got a text from Raider Rather. So, yo, what's up, Q? It's Raider Rather representing the nation out in the 304, almost heaven. I was messaging my Snapchat Al earlier today, and I asked what position he thinks the Raiders should take at 7, and he responded with offensive lineman of all things. I, for one, think we should listen to our robot overlords and take a lineman in round 1 to protect Jimmy, Mr. Glass, Garoppolo from getting killed in the pocket. Maybe a guy like Skoronski out of Northwestern, who also may be available if the Raiders trade back. So there's some options. Appreciate your show, Q. Keep it going. Just win, baby. That's from Raider Rather. And thanks so much for the text. And look, Skoronski is one of the guys that has been rumored and reported that is, could be linked to the Raiders as early as 7. I don't think that they need to take an offensive lineman at 7, but I understand you do got to protect Jimmy Garoppolo. So if they decide to go offensive line there at 7, I don't think Raider Nation is going to be thrilled, especially with the players there defensively that could be had. But it would make sense to take care of the trenches, especially the right side of the offensive line. So I wouldn't be mad. Skoronski is one of the better offensive linemen. That's the thing. It's not like they'd be getting an offensive lineman that's not good. Right, Skoronski is definitely one of the better ones. They got him out there with Paris Johnson Jr. If you need a pure tackle, maybe Paris Johnson is the way you go. If you need a guy that could play multiple positions like Dave Ziegler likes, then maybe you take Skoronski because he could play the tackle position. He could play the offensive guard position, multiple spots, which is, again, the versatility that Dave Ziegler's looking for. So thank you for that text, my man. I do appreciate you, and it's just another element to be added to the mix of who could be available at 7 when you're looking at the silver and black. Up next, got a call from Jordan in Oregon. He's calling to talk about the draft week, the convo I had with GM Dave Ziegler at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center on Friday, and also looking back at this draft process from day 1 of the offseason when we all knew it was time to get into the draft, what he was talking about and who he was looking at. Here's Jordan in Oregon.
Hey, what's going on, Q? Jordan, Oregon, calling in draft week here. Super stoked, man. That's finally here. It's been a long time coming, but hey, I wanted to call in. I love your interview with GM Dave Ziegler. I wanted to tell you, too, major props to you on your professionalism for not, answering that question on who you would take, especially live in front of everybody, and then causing maybe some sort of reaction on his that gets overlooked at. Stories break that, Q said Richardson and Dave Ziegler said good job. Or, you just never know. We don't want any of that stuff gaining traction before the draft here. And so, yeah, I mainly wanted to call in today to say, after all of the thought I've put into this draft, I think it's really cool to look back at like your very first initial thoughts. Like whenever you go through a really big process of evaluating anything, whether it be something with your job or professional football, it's always fun to go back and look at your initial thoughts and see how far you've kind of veered away from that. And Q, I got to tell you, man, I just like the old school, playground picking football teams. Hey, you get a pick, I get a pick, you get a pick. I from day one have always been just super high on Stroud. I mean, from even watching his college tape to watching him in college. He's on a lot of major games. We've all seen him play. And I mean, I was seeing him getting picked apart pretty early, like why he shouldn't be the number 1 overall pick. And that blew my mind. I mean, like he's a huge, has a lot of upside, big player, big arm, everything we need. He's like, you could plug him in and have your franchise quarterback. And so this whole IQ test or whatever this crap is that's come out on the guy, I feel bad for him, because it seems like it's kind of been a lot of it coming out, but I also could see it really benefiting going the Raiders' way. And if Stroud somehow slips even just past that number 2 pick, I really hope we get our future guy. And that's kind of the one thing I wanted to bring up is my first initial thoughts of when we released Carr, or the whole Carr situation was shaken out after the Pittsburgh game, is I thought, you know what, I hope that Raider Nation, we can get our guy, and we can get a rookie. We can get our guy that we can grow together with a young stud. And similar to what a lot of these teams that are super big-time contenders right now, they grew with their guy. They groomed their guy. He was, theirs from the start. And I just feel like, I know that might sound cheesy, but I feel like we deserve that. And that's what I hope. Peace out, brother.
Thank you so much for the call, my man. I appreciate you. CJ Stroud, that's been your guy since day one. And it's crazy how things goes in waves, right? I mean, for the longest, it was Bryce Young and CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. One of those guys is going to go number 1. One of those guys is going to go number 2. Now it looks like C.J. Stroud is dropping. Bryce Young is solidified as the Panthers' number 1 guy. Who knows where Will Levis and Anthony Richardson are going to go, but looks like C.J. Stroud is on that slide. Is he really on a slide, or is that them just talking? I don't know. I still wouldn't be shocked if we get to draft day and Houston takes C.J. Stroud at number 2 anyway. I still wouldn't be shocked because they need a quarterback, and it just seems like, yeah, they can go get their defensive player, and maybe because DeMeco Ryans has extra time on his contract, I believe he has a 6-year deal, that, he feels comfortable that he can go and get a quarterback later if they're not really in love with the quarterbacks there. Maybe they get one at 12 since they do pick at 12 again. So maybe they go and get a Hendon Hooker. I'm not too sure, but it's going to be interesting, right? It's going to be real interesting to see how it goes. I think that, Richardson, I like Stroud. I like Richardson. I think those guys could both be really good quarterbacks in the league. I think the edge rusher would be great, defensive tackle, cornerback. I mean, I don't think there's any element of the defense that could be addressed that would be a problem. Right, at some point, the offensive line and tight end needs to be addressed as well. But when you have as many draft picks as the Raiders have, all of that could be addressed and then some. So that's what I'm excited about as far as that goes. So thank you so much for that. We'll close out with one quick text from Joby1 Kenobi in Arlington, Texas. He says, Q, trade back three spots, swap picks, and takes first-round pick and a third-round pick for next year. That would leave us 2 firsts and 2 thirds for next year. Now, next year, trade up to number 1 and offer – or number 2, wait, hold on. Now next year, trade up to number 1 and offer or 2 number 1s and maybe a number 1 for the following year, or number 1s and a number 2 second-round pick for the number 1 next year. What do you think, Hugh? I think I'm confused. Thanks for the text, but I think there was too many 2s, 1s, 1s, 2s, 2s, 1s. I don't know. I think basically what you're saying is get some more ammunition and trade up to number 1 or number 2 to go get the quarterback that you really need. I think that's what you're talking about in this text. I'm not 100% sure, and I just don't think you can really bank on that. Right, that's the thing about it. I don't think you could bank on being able to package a couple picks and move up. I think you have to bank on, if you're going to try to move up to go target one of those guys like a Caleb Williams or a Drake May next year, you'll probably have to sell the farm. You'll probably have to give up a ton of capital to go get those guys. I think that's something that you just have to brace yourself for. So if that's the way that the Raiders are going to do it, and I've talked about it a couple times, then they have to make sure that they build that team up this year. Get all the talent lined up where they need it to be, defensively, offensively, make sure that that roster is solid. And then you can feel comfortable with saying, hey, we're about to give up everything to go up and get the guy that we think could take this team to the next level. That's really the only way you can do it. I don't think it's, grab a couple picks here, grab a couple picks here, and that's going to solidify it. I think the price of business is going to be high. And whoever's sitting there at the number 1 and number 2 spot is probably going to want a lot because they probably need a quarterback too. That's the reality of it. When you're trading up for a quarterback, it's always a ton. So that's all I got time for. Went a little bit long in today's show. Sorry, Ari. I appreciate you as always. Appreciate you dealing with me and my struggles with the time, but had to get everything in, or wanted to get everything in. So I think that we did a good job with that. So there it is. That's all we got for you for today. For tomorrow's show, we'll have more calls and texts off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, news and notes, as I'll be in Kansas City. Depending on what time you're listening to this, my flight's actually at 6 a.m. So I'm going to be taking off out of Las Vegas and landing in Kansas City, be able to do the radio show from KC and rocking and rolling the rest of the week, and be back here in Vegas on Saturday. So everything the rest of the way will come from Kansas City. We'll talk to draft prospects. We'll talk to NFL network guys like Daniel Jeremiah, Charles Davis, Joel Klatt. All those guys will be made available. ESPN guys will be made available. I'm supposed to be linking up with RG3, so maybe he'll be part of the show. We'll see. It's going to be a busy week in Kansas City, but I'm looking forward to it. So Raider Nation, until then, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.